Hi, I'm Dawn Marie Solis with Neuro Awesome Life, and I am here with Carlos Frank Rodriguez. And he and I have been getting to know each other over the last few months, and I think becoming friends. We are both neurodivergent people, and have these wonderful spiderwebby conversations. And if you're ADHD, you might know what I mean by that, that we might start here and end up someplace way far away from where we started. So this should be a lot of fun. But Carlos, thank you so much for being willing to talk with me in this particular way.
Yes, it's like you said, it's been only a couple of months, but sometimes as I look at the ground we've covered, it seems like years. And just being on this, which would be the first time I've ever professionally talked about embracing ADHD and how it's impacted my life, my confidence, and most importantly, I think how I look at myself and others. So thank you so much for facilitating that. And again, I think what this is all about is such a unique, special community to where we can help each other and connect almost instantly.
Yeah, I think we did have a very quick rapport. It can be so refreshing and comforting to talk to somebody that might understand. I didn't feel like I had to constantly explain myself to you, and that was really nice.
Yeah, that's it. As we kind of expressed, and I'm sure we'll cover, is I found out that I had ADHD after I found out I had PTSD from my time in service and time overseas. And I found out I had ADHD right before I had TBI. So I kind of got the trifecta of acronyms in PTSD, TBI, and ADHD, and they all really present similarly. And
Yes.
The TBI and the PTSD, they didn't make sense onto how I'm open with and some of the decisions I made when I felt alone. But when I got the diagnosis of ADHD, I understood, it all made sense to me as I could look back and see why I could be so brilliant in some circumstances and how I made some boneheaded and very impactful decisions in my life that I don't want to say I'm glad I made them, but they put me down this path to where we're at and kind of gave me the confidence to connect with people like you. And I think that's what started our connection, is two people. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you're a late stage diagnosis as well, right?
Oh yeah, we have the complex PTSD, the traumatic brain injury, and the ADHD in common. So yeah, I joke that I'm I joke that I'm the poster child of neurodivergence because I'm so multi-layered. So I'm those things, and I'm autistic, dyslexic, dyscalculic, and dyspraxic. And then, put on the stuff from complex PTSD and the traumatic brain injury. And life is simultaneously fascinating and fascinating.
Well, that's it. And for a while, as having had it on paper, and I say this with extreme humility, I was proud of my career and my deployments overseas and what I did. And I grew up underneath the same, in the intelligence community and the same mentors for 10 years. And I don't want to say I didn't appreciate amount of knowledge they piled onto me and the level of opportunities that they gave me. But I do feel that only now are they budding into what they can be, right? I mean, such rich experiences that I can't say I took them for granted, but I wasn't equipped at the time to fully appreciate the lingering effect that they're having now. And that's what I give back to the tenacity of just trying to figure out, why can my mind be so across the spectrum? And that is where what we connect on is, I'm not this, I'm not that, and it doesn't really matter. I think it's understanding, right? Understanding why, and being able to sit across from someone and they can understand why as well. So I think that is just been a profound insight into who I am. I always say now I can freely admit that I'm an introvert all day, but to mask some of the insecurities growing up, and I learned that a little bit of charisma could get me out of some situations,
Yeah.
and I carry that into my later years.
Yeah. I think some of my journey in learning what was masking and what's legitimately me has been like super interesting and useful, but in some ways really sad, because I was kind of brought up in a family that didn't allow for independent thought very much, to the point that everything had its sort of appropriateness scale. There were appropriate and inappropriate colors. Like, forget gendered colors. We like surpassed that. There were inappropriate colors. Like, I tell this story about standing in a Walmart trying to choose a plastic cup so that I could go work at a camp that my children were going to attend. It was a way to help afford sending them to camp. And I couldn't pick it because all of the plastic cups were colors I'd been taught were inappropriate. And I realized in that moment, I'd never developed my own sense of what I enjoyed, what, I didn't have a sense of style. There was so much I didn't have developed about myself as an individual. And breaking free of that was just a really beautiful thing. But for people like you and me that spend so much of our lives not understanding how our brains work, and so being able to be told we're not good enough or we're inappropriate or we're something, right? It really can complicate our sense of self. You talk about that confidence piece. When we're not allowed to know ourselves from an early age, we show up in adulthood with some unfortunate thinking about ourselves that does not belong.
I think that's it, is from a young age, and I can't say that I ever felt unloved, but I can say I don't know what love is. And so taking that up, and a very kind of constricted upbringing, and much discipline, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's much discipline instilled in me from a young age. I mean, from reading voraciously, no TV in the house, which I credit much to my mother's kind of raising me. I mean, I think she knew perhaps maybe I had something relative to ADHD, but I was a voracious reader from a young age. That carried on. And I think being ADHD, reading is one of the hardest things. And so you take that level of discipline on into my professional life, and undergrad and grad school. And I just remember thinking, how are people spending this much time like doing this, right? And having a family. And so I would master this, where I'd spend the entire night, weekend, what have you, on whatever the task was at hand, and then try and come to work like it was just as easy as everybody else, right? Like I hadn't been up 23 hours trying to solve this. And I think that would later impact relationships. And you talk about masking as being sad, and really having to sit down and figure out what's legit, and who am I? And it's not, for me, it was a conversation that got better. And initially it was am I just been an imposter my entire life? You know? And also I would say I was, you know, allowed, tested into gifted and talented for reading at a young age, but you put a math or anything science in front of me, not happening. And I think it was, you know, it kind of just came in the family where everybody else was math and science oriented, but not me. And so if I'd get a C in it, that was good. And so I loved engineering. I always wanted to kind of be an engineer, but I, again, at a young age, learned to grade myself as not having the aptitude. But as I look back in my career and some of, you know, most of my profession was spent amongst some of the finest engineers in the world. And even to this day, I'm involved in, you know, F1 in schools, North America, which is the largest STEM nonprofit, you know, advancing STEM initiatives. And I think, my God, even if it wasn't planned that I ended up in some of these places, I still found a way to be around engineers. And so that's remarkable, where I never gave myself the opportunity to be an engineer because of a preconceived notion. I still managed to find a way to thrive amongst them.
I think that's a really important point, Carlos. I think a lot of us who are neurodivergent, we have spaces where we learn maybe quite easily and we adapt quite easily to the way it's being taught, and other places that we don't. And you know, one of the things that I really struggled with is that things like math and science weren't taught in a way that worked for my style of learning. I'm a very visual learner. I'm a very kinetic learner. The idea of learning math by sitting at my desk and watching equations be written on the board, I know that that works for some people. It doesn't work for me. If I can't like hold the stuff, which is why geometry worked for me. I'd held a cube, I'd held a cone, I'd held a, right? Like maybe I wasn't holding them in class, but I could put my experience to my learning, and I did really well in geometry. I've learned since that dyslexia is actually a brain that is good at 3D. We can conceptualize, we can map. I see the front of something and I might be able to very closely predict what the sides, bottom, top, and back look like. So what that means when a dyslexic person reads, their brain is trying to 3D or put together a puzzle that doesn't need either of those things. So we think of dyslexia as a reading disorder, but it's actually not. If we teach the dyslexic person how to tell their brain everything's where it's supposed to be, leave it alone, there's significantly less challenge, right? But
It's
yeah, go ahead.
no, I mean that again, these are kind of why we connect, and it never ceases to amaze me when I make friends with a, you know, someone of our caliber. And when I was first finding about this diagnosis, and I've got a great team around me, and they were telling me, or maybe it was a podcast, or, you know, you really go down this when you first figure out you have this diagnosis and you want to write a book and you want to do all of this stuff, and just let everybody else know that, hey, if you have it, go figure it out, because it's so enchantingly delightful to know that. And there's a big difference between not taking ownership of past deeds and understanding.
Right.
And I own every mistake I've made, and I made plenty of them, right? And so now all I'm saying is I can understand why we went this way instead of that way. And that's not, there's clearly differentiation from not owning what I've done. I've done plenty of that, and I will continue to do so. But what you really just pointed on I couldn't, you know, math, I hated it, right? But I did, and also understanding the difference between a linear and nonlinear mind, and how not everybody thinks the way I do. Is I look out and I see everything and connect everything, and then I know, you know, you move this over here, 3D effect, how it's going to take place, and how that's going to change the environment, and all of the probabilities associated with. So whereas I never did well in math, or as well as I was determined to do, let's put it that way, right? It may take 10x longer, but I could figure it out. I enjoyed statistics and economics, and I think a lot of those is, at least on the statistics part, is you could put in these wide-ranging theories and kind of hedge in the outcome you wanted. And so I learned early on to be friends with statistics, and to this day, I you could show me the numbers, but how do we get there, and what factors, I think most importantly, make that
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah. I figured out pretty young that I learned differently than I was being taught. And it sent me to college wanting to be a teacher, because I wanted to help all the different kinds of learners value themselves as an individual. My learning style had been so criticized and demeaned by peer and teacher alike. I never wanted any young person to have that experience. And I found standardized education very
Brutal.
unfriendly to that.
Brutal, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so, I felt the need to leave teaching, which I'm still sad about, but I find other ways to do it through, I just teach in a different way now. But that whole idea that we think and process and return information into the world differently, each and every one of us does. If you get 10 people together and you put, we'll call it a red cup, okay? You put a red cup in front of them and you ask them to tell you what color it is. Some people will tell you it's red. Some people might tell you it's orange. Some people will get really specific, right? With the umber tones or that, right? They're going to get really, they can't just give you like, it's a red cup or an orange cup. They've got to find the minutia, and it must be represented in their answer, right? You're going to get a few different kinds of answers from any 10 people. Any 10 people you ask, what color is this? For some of them, it's not going to be a simple answer. Some of them won't even know if they can answer you because it feels like it's on the edge. Well, I mean, it's kind of red, but it's kind of orange, and I'm not sure, and I can't answer you, right? So the simple question, quote unquote, will break their brain because they're trying to be exacting. Every single one of us thinks differently, learns differently, processes differently, but our society tells us we're all supposed to be the same.
And we're absolutely not. I think if it's I call it the kaleidoscope effect of putting minds together. And then I think if I'm good at anything, it's putting teams together. And even though I would have spent 10 years in the military, I early on, 3 of the years I would say was spent in the military that people kind of think of. And early on in my career, at about the 3-year mark, I was outsourced on like a loan type deal to the intelligence community agency in there. And I came into contact with a civilian boss. And so I would say what was supposed to be a 2-year kind of controlled loan, or whatever these things are called, right, where I'm going to supplement and help out this group, turned into 10 years of my life. And so there's a reason why, and it may have changed now, but if you have ADHD, you cannot join the military. So I shouldn't even got through, right? So yay to mom for not acknowledging or recognizing it. So I got through that, and I went into the military, and then I would come across 2 mentors that I would stay with for 10 years. And I didn't know it then, a lot of the things that situations they gave me and opportunities. But I think they cared more about that I had the gumption to try. And I would just keep trying and until, you know, I got it right. And so, you know, I did a talk on failure once, and there was a lot of failure if you want to look at it that way in my life. But I say, when you look at it, having the opportunity to fail multiple times means somebody believes in you, right? Somebody picked me back up and gave me not always the kindest words, but gave me enough confidence and to kind of get back up and keep going forward on a myriad of different assignments. So that's where I say again, you know, one, how did I get here? Made it through, you know, somehow the requirements of not having ADHD to join, getting outsourced on what was supposed to be a 2-year assignment, staying with, you know, kind of the same mentors for 10 years and in that same environment. So I really thrived there, and I would advance to higher levels of management and responsibility. And those would be between the years 2002 and 2015. 2016, other acronyms were creeping up, and they would be more associated with perhaps, you know, 4 tours to combat zones and issues along those. But I found I wanted nothing to do with the service at that point, and I didn't know why. And so I made a break to another state and kind of just leaving everything about the defense community behind. And I was running. And so that's when everything kind of erupted. And I would go all Charlie Sheen for about 8 months in this period of searching. And fortunately, I was strong enough to figure it out. And here I am. And so I think that is it. It's just having the grit and determination and not knowing how to quit. Because trust me, there was a moment where I wanted to quit everything. And couldn't even do that right. So here I am.
I relate to that. I wish that wasn't something you and I shared, but I do. I relate to that. I think it's a pretty common thing for folks who are discovering their neurodivergent identities a bit later in life.
Everything else in my life, yeah, I could figure it out in some amount of time.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of us, it can come from sort of those crashing into a brick wall moments in our lives where there's no way to move forward without figuring out how our brains work. There's no amount of therapy in the world that's going to help us if we don't know how our brains work. And this is actually something that I'm trying to start advocating for more broadly than I currently do. I believe strongly all therapy would become significantly more beneficial if the therapist took the time to understand what kind of learner the person was. So are they an auditory learner? Are they a visual learner? Are they a tactile learner? A combination, right? Because if we're trying to do therapy, what the person is telling you and how they're responding to your questions is intimately tied to the way they have understood their experiences. Understanding our experiences is learning. Period.
So you hit it spot on. So as I was going through this, and I got boom, all 3 of these acronyms thrown at me, trifecta. And so and going through the VA. And so PTSD was the primary one they were treating first, right? And then I think that was the most, whatever you want to call it, for whatever reason, that's the one that got the most attention. And then TBI and definitely ADHD were secondary to that. And so already, just like the education system, they have a preconceived notion of this is the cookie cutter stuff that's going to treat these veterans with PTSD. And it wasn't working, right?
Yeah.
You can't paint your way out of this. You can't journal your way out of this. And trust me, I was going through all the motions because I truly wanted to, what happened? and understand where these conflicting thoughts were coming from and all of that. And so it wasn't until where, you know, I know when I'm committed and it's not working out, something needs to be adjusted. And that's where it came into that. All three of these are needed to be treated separately, and they are now. But even on top of that, we need to recognize my mind, my brain, and how even going to war with an ADHD mind, right? And seeing all of that stuff that comes with the war and war is horrible. I think it left a impact on my brain from a nonlinear fashion than maybe others. And you talk to anybody that's been downrange, and there's always someone that's been further down, right? And my job was installing, for the most part, communication cell towers and all of this stuff in remote locations, and supporting a lot of the communication needs. And it's fascinating how technology changed war in my lifetime. Different story. But I think that was it that you hit on, was my mind had never been appreciated until now, the way it's wired, right? And I don't fit in a lot of the preconceived boxes. And that's why I can look back and say, you know, people talk about, well, just be happy. What is that? I know content at working hard and accomplishing something, but what is this being happy, right? And that, don't let that sound, you know, too horrible. I've had, you know, splashes of life, time in my life where I've been content and felt accomplished. And there's difference though between feeling accomplished and being happy. And so that, I think, is what I'm striving for right now, is this happiness.
That's a thing that I think many of us neurodivergent people would also say they don't feel like they have a grasp on, this happiness thing, right? It's not that I don't laugh at a joke. It's not that I don't enjoy a moment. It's not that I don't have times of peace or contentedness or appreciation. But I wonder if, especially for those of us who are ADHD, we're analyzing the world so quickly and so deeply all of the time that simplicity almost isn't possible for us. Impossible. And happiness seems to be a more simple, it's not a nuanced emotion. And I'm not sure we're capable of things that don't require nuance. It's like, we can stand and look at a sunset and feel the beauty and awe of it all. And we can be on high alert, and we can be like noticing the trash over there on the side. And like, it's very difficult for us to just go, oh, lovely sunset.
So that and not everybody thinks that way, right? Like that's a new revelation, that some people could just legit stand there and watch the sunset. And in my mind, I'm thinking, well, it's going to be gone here pretty soon, right? And are we taking it into the best capability and all of those things, right? And so you hit it on even Parachute Group, right? The plan I put together, the business I put together, and how we're, empowering small businesses to small, medium businesses to really do more with data. And definitely a neuro kind of vision, right? And using apprenticeships to do that. I'm a third generation apprentice, and so looking around at a lot of our creativity has to do with solving problems that we can relate to. I think I'm good at, and I'm very open with my story as it relates kind of to veterans, and now, and realizing it's beyond that. It's the neurodiversity, which is a global issue, right? And I've been fascinated to talk with people from different cultures that have it, and how history has written about it, right? It's kind of fascinating. And I don't know, maybe for so many years, I guess 4 decades, that I've associated happiness with accomplishment of a big deed. That when accomplished, I'm exhausted, but that's that feeling of fulfillment. But to just bask in kind of idleness, I can't do that. And 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 I think, having looked back on relationships, that impacted a lot of them. And when you take a mind like mine that's been altered by a myriad of environments and trauma, part of the masking was looking aloof, hiding the insecurities, right? And you put an aptitude test in front of me, I don't do well, but realizing that I'm smart in a different way, in a way that a lot of people had a much higher perception of me than I had of myself. And that's not to say I look down on myself, but just, I always pride myself on being able to outwork you. And as I get older, I can't, do that with some of these younger minds around. And so that, I think that's it, is coming of age at 44, behind a company that took a long time to get here. And I think the hardest part was understanding my mind. And launching it off has been the hardest journey of my life, starting and founding a company. And I say that having been through, pretty complex environments and some, combat environments and what have you. By far, starting a company, founding a company on the outset of learning that you have PTSD, TBI, and ADHD. The first, we're 4.5 years into it. The first 2.5 years was finding out about myself, and was I willing to let people believe in me again? And it's been fascinating. And I think one of the things that came out of it was I've been a data nerd my whole life, so that's kind of a no-brainer why we went into digital transformation for marginalized companies. I want to, with our apprenticeship program, we're reskilling veterans, refugees, and neurodivergents. And when you look at those 3 sets of minds, they have an aptitude for perhaps not feeling accepted mainstream. And what I know is I can look at a human, and first I want to know if you can understand me, or how much work I got to do to position so you do understand me. And everybody's a little bit differently. And I think these working in remote environments has so many benefits and opportunities for neurodiversity community to capitalize on, if you got someone at the top understanding that and saying, okay, we're all going to work remote. That could be powerful for some people to understand where they best think, what environments. Conversely, it can be even more detrimental than some of the environments for the neuro community.
That's a big part of my work right now, to help organizations learn how to restructure their workflows and their ideas of what a position or a job description needs to be. If you're hiring for the job description, you might almost always feel frustrated because very few people are going to really match all of the things in that job description. But if you're willing to look at your work as a whole, and then look at the people that you have, and you allow yourself to be flexible with how do we get the work done with the people that we have, instead of saying, how do you get this piece of it done with that person? Hopefully I'm making sense, right? So if you can help a company find its flexibility and its creativity to really utilize the best of what their team has to offer, not only is the work going to get done, but it's probably going to get done in a much more productive, interesting, creative, and profitable way.
That's
Needing
what
to
I
stick.
call it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you call what?
The kaleidoscope of mind effect, right?
Yeah.
Is I know I have some great minds here, and they're bringing a unique sense of skill sets, behavior patterns, and how they operate, right? And when you do that, and you know there's some known unknowns in a batch of a team, you also know that there's going to be some bumpy periods. And I think that's especially when there's no finer the resistance than a neurodiverse mind that's dead set on not following instruction. you know
Yeah.
and I think when you can recognize that and create and kind of prepare for not having that, you get the opposite of that, and that's where it's just you define the success. I guarantee it'll be achieved.
Yeah, one of the analogies that I've used occasionally, not everybody enjoys a sports analogy, but if you think about different team sports, one of the most flexible team sports is basketball. Yes, every one of the five on the court has their job, right? They're the people that are supposed to throw the basket. There are people that are supposed to guard. There are people that are supposed to, move the ball. Everybody definitely has their job, but in any given situation, you may need to let yourself change your concept of your job because the moment requires it. So your point guard might shoot a basket. You're right. There may be a moment where your forwards are all of a sudden defending.
Right.
And that's the kind of company flexibility I'm trying to help people understand, is that if you're willing to play team a little bit differently, not just everybody know your job, stay in your lane, get the work done, but actually know each other's jobs. When somebody's having a hard time, back them up. Have the company help people really realize their top level skills and put them to work. Those of us who are ADHD, we need that dopamine boost like 15 times a day. So make sure we have something different we can do on occasion, right? I can't do this anymore. I got to go do that thing over there, right?
That's exactly it, right? And that's what I say, access to real-time data, which if we let it be is just a 24/7 stream of dopamine hits, right? And so you got to put the control in there, and why, kind of social media, I kind of stay away from it because I know, I'm predisposed for addiction and stuff like that, and needing that. And so with real-time data, and the ability to, and this is something that we did in the military with extreme success, on decentralize the decision making, right? Put the policy and procedures in place to set the culture and the norms, but empower your work group to, as they see the data feeds coming in, they see the frontline environment changing, they're empowered to make those decisions for success. And I think that, as you said, it takes time, and it's not just coming across new technology, putting in some new data streams or what have you. It's why are they there? What's the purpose of the data for? And I think everybody just has an affinity now to collect data, and in some cases AI scares me, but I think AI properly introduced to a community, say the neurodiversity community, you're gonna have 100x output on stuff like that, right? It's scary in truly the amount of efficiency that can be had if properly structured.
Yeah, I'm with you. I am probably a little more thrilled than frightened, but I don't know, it depends on the moment. I find artificial intelligence something that could be brilliant, but I also read a lot of dystopian fiction growing up. So,
Yeah,
you know,
I say from a career of having spent in digital solutions and that everything kind of data is AI is nothing new, and it probably more times than not, it all starts with the human, right? Is you find a human doing something great and you want to automate it and do it more. And then that's where the AI comes in and how can you do more of what this person's doing? And then models get created and whatnot. But you always got to be able to trace it back to a human source if someone was doing something and we automated it. And so it's really nothing new as long as you understand the inputs and outputs of data and what's going into your AI model, right? That's step one. Do you know everything about what's going in? And if not, can you not, can you quantify what you don't know? And there's your risk factor on the outputs.
well, and going to that human on the foundational end, one of the things that's being researched right now and talked about right now in terms of AI is unconscious and implicit bias. When a person is designing a thing, they are doing it from their perspective on what is good and useful. But what is good and useful? We just talked about it in terms of therapy, right? Talk therapy is wonderful for some people. It's not wonderful for you and me, right? If somebody comes to us and says, okay, tell me about your trauma, they're re-traumatizing us. The way our brains are designed is to hold tons of information about any given thing. So if somebody wants us to tell them about it, we're going to access all of that. And we have a PTSD-like experience. Even if we don't technically have PTSD, we have a reliving of the trauma. So talk therapy in and of itself can actually be frighteningly detrimental to somebody like you and me if they don't know how our brains work.
I will sit here and say that it absolutely is. And so with me in therapy and how it was put upon me, it got a whole lot worse before it got better.
Yeah.
And it didn't get better until I took it into my own hands.
And I had that same experience.
And I have no problem saying that, right? And that's not to say alter the current existing state. I'm not talking to those people. I'm talking to if you're one of us and you're trying to do all you can to figure it out and it's not working and you know yourself. I know my level of grit. I know my level of determination. And I know when I put X amount of effort into something and it's still not working, something's wrong, right? Mm-hmm. And so I had been doing that and it was getting worse. And then so I said, okay, let's go back to the basics now. And I couldn't be happier than the therapist I've had now for the last 3 years.
Oh, that's wonderful.
He's the one who sent me to probably within the first, and I cycled through about 7 of them before I found this gentleman. Within the first 3 months, he asked me if I had ADHD. And I said, that's not, we got much bigger issues than that. let's focus on this other stuff. And so I think it was 7 months later, and he was steady, persistent in a way that has been extremely effective for my learning environment. And so finally, I just almost shut him up. I went and got tested, and in the military, the retired veteran community, if you're going to get tested for ADHD, it goes up to one person that can prescribe these drugs, I guess. Mm-hmm. So I went in, scheduled this test, got tested, went through a series of, 3 or 4 people, and with each kind of test going up a little bit more, and came back flying colors. I had it, and so I told them, but even then I fought it. I said, well, I'm not taking the drugs. I think the VA, when I first went in, they had thrown 18 different medications at me. And I had successfully, I think by that point, gotten off all of them except 2, and those 2 were targeted for when they were going to fall off. And here they are, throw another one at me. So I didn't take it for the first 6 months, and by now I had a new company, and I'd always been upfront with PTSD and kind of where I was coming from, and so well, I called him up. So I got a new one, and surprisingly, I think out of that meeting, a couple other people in the group also shared that they had, similar. And so that's when it got to me on. I say I've campaigned on crazy for the last 4 years, but telling my story, and you hear my story, and my story is so relatable. I think just because so many people want to do the right thing and be productive in society. It's just about grit, and determination, and the hardest part was aligning your social life and how you perceive yourself and how you want other people to perceive you. And once you can align that correctly, you got a great community.
Yeah.
Figure it out.
Yeah.
And I was my worst enemy for the first couple of years.
Yes, I think we can get awfully convinced that the ways in which we are different are our worst qualities. And I'm so grateful to be in a place now in my life. I'm in my mid-50s and I love who I am. I love how I think about the world. There are times where it's truly excruciatingly difficult, especially with a traumatic brain injury. A little over a year ago, I got hit by a car and my memory has not been the same. Prior to the accident, people joked that I was a human tape recorder. I could remember every word of every conversation. And I have a very unreliable memory now. There will be conversations, events that I don't even have a path to remembering them. They're just gone. And having my memory, which was a thing that I relied on for my survival. That's a whole other story, but I relied on it for my survival. To have that taken from me, can't even explain what that does to your sense of self. And needing to remember, no, good memory, bad memory, I'm valid. I have purpose, I have worth, and it's okay for me to need help.
Yeah.
And I think that's a thing in our society that's very difficult to combine, is the need for assistance in certain places in our life, the need for grace in certain places in our life, and believing truly that we are valid, valuable humans. And to get to that place can take an exceptional amount of effort.
You go back and even you look at a TBI as I'm going through that and how it really manifests, years after, kind of the right. And there's parts of and you hesitate to even bring it up in public because is it an excuse, right? And so that's why and I'm past all of that, right? And so it is what it is, but there is an obligation that I hold myself to, right? A higher standard of paying attention to the minor details. And so there's, a lot of the mind occupying, why don't I remember that? And some of it, it'll come, or what am I missing out on? And so I think the acceptance was a huge part for me. I can sit here and say anxiety is really something I don't struggle with anymore. It's almost a flat line on it.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's it with respect to how much I struggled on it, right? And that realization came within probably the last year and a half, next to no anxiety. But here's what set in after acceptance. There's moments of extreme depression. And I think that came from, if you look at anxiety as fear of the unknown to come what may. And then, but even the depression isn't that bad because I can understand that it's a predisposed neurological condition. And so that, armed with new understanding, you do the self-check, right? Am I exercising? Am I reading? Am I engaged? And then usually if you can check off on those, and it's going to pass. But I think the acceptance that there's going to be times where it lingers, and my God, is it painful?
Yeah.
And so I think that is a new reflection, and also as I look towards this place of happiness, to be able to fit that stuff in, right? It's going to happen. It's not, I could sit here and say all of this work and all of this profound knowledge, and it's great and it's marvelous, and it gives what everybody wants, hope, right? But hope and ambition, that's what keeps us going forward. And so you take that and say, okay. And here's the thing, in retrospect and comparison, I would much rather have depression than anxiety. For me, everybody's different. And in my case, anxiety, I could trace it to, the affinity to map out probabilities of what may happen based off of current scenarios. Do what I can now, come what may, right? Because here's the deal, even if I do get it perfect, I can hit that moment and voila, I'm going through one of my depression bouts. So I think that's why I do what I do, and I feel being able to talk about it, and especially being a macho man, and I'll tell you what, by me talking about it and the survival, I had to talk about it. I would never, made it this far. I've met some great people that will double back, and they're going through it as well. And I think that's what we're doing, is we're just making a Ponzi scheme out of this whole talk about it, and that's what's, I think, has for me, the takeaway out of this, right, is finding out who I am, owning it, and there's still people out there that are bigoted, and they got their own issues, right? But I can sit here and I can understand why somebody is acting the way they are, right? I would say, going into this, I could probably describe 10 emotions that I could put myself through, and maybe even somebody else, and so that number has increased significantly, and that is understanding, right? What's this feeling? Why? Boom. And that makes it so much easier. And conversely, once you get kind of good at doing that on yourself, and it's not fun in the beginning, you can do it on somebody else, right? Why are they coming at me this way, right? And this is odd. And sometimes that's enough to just accept and move on.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, Carlos, I could talk to you forever. Hopefully we'll do this again, because we touched on so many different topics just in this 45 minutes to an hour, that I would love to get into more in depth with you. So I hope you'll come back and we'll talk again. But I'm really grateful. I'm really, really grateful that you are willing to share your story, and that you do it in such an open and honest way. Getting to be 50 years old and finally starting to feel like there was good reason for the way I am, right? Instead of 50 years of a lot of abuse, and being told that who I am wasn't just invalid, but was pointless on the planet. To be able to begin the journey of, no, they were wrong. Right? They're welcome to their opinions, but I'm no longer going to carry those opinions as though they mean anything
Yeah,
about me.
I know that moment. Yeah, comes
Yeah.
with a little bit of sadness, because you're letting people go.
Yes. Yeah. Sometimes you do. You have to let people go because they're on their journey and it can't cooperate with yours. So, bless them, wave goodbye, move on. But being able to meet people like you and talk to people like you who have, our life experiences are wildly different, but we still have had similar journeys. There's still connecting points, things that we understand innately because we're built similarly.
Yeah,
You know,
mine.
it's like a mallard duck from Georgia understands the mallard duck in Canada, right? Like you're a mallard duck. We get it.
And that's it, is when you take it back to that denominator of just minds understanding each other, right? Void of race, gender, color, social status, right?
Yes.
If I've learned anything about mental health is mental health don't give a 2 cents about what color you are, where you come from, right? It's gonna
Right.
get you. And I sit here and literally I had to, kind of had to talk to people about how I talk about, PTSD. And when I would be talking to somebody who's non-veteran, they would almost, kind of whisper or say, I've got PTSD too, but not like you. And I say, no, you got it just like me. How you got it is irrelevant as you put time untreated between the incident and where you're at now, because it all is going to present the same. It's all going to bubble up left untreated. And so that is where I say, at least amongst the veteran community, we don't need another dime thrown at us, right? We need acceptance, we need understanding, and I think that is it. And I felt as, what do I have to lose, right? I've been to war 4 times, right? You want to judge me? I mean, there's plenty to judge. I judged myself, and that's why I got here. And I felt I had an opportunity to stand up for a issue that so many can rally around and relate to. And I had to do it. And it wasn't, in the beginning, it was easy. I was calling myself all of these acronyms and just, what I knew about them then. And I think that was just my mindset on the amount of people and wanting to help people, that people that, in the beginning, me talking about it was so I wouldn't run from it, right? That was it. I know I could mask stuff. I knew I could put this all up to where it would, I could make it go away if I wanted to. And so I put it out there publicly. And then that's where other people came to me, I think in the beginning, thinking that I was a lot stronger, a lot further along in the journey than I was. And I've learned so much that way, but that's why I'm also thankful of, I say I got past the PTSD from the wars and put that war's nothing new, right? And it's horrible, and we should always really consider if we're going to go with a different topic to war. But that's where it needs to be. And I think before that was the trauma before, and now understanding how my mind works, which is a new challenge. And how do we utilize that effectively? And that is where I'm very thankful of the second stage of this journey, if you will, understanding my mind, and what all I can do with that is people like you that are allowing me to set an example as well, right? And I think that is where this happens as we kind of close off on this, and you're so involved in this community. And as you touched on, our lives should have never touched, right? We should never cross paths, but yet we did, off of, I think, a couple of messages exchanged off of a commonality of a thought I shared. And here we are. So it's with, absolutely, we'll continue this discussion, keep going forward in what you're doing. And I'm just happy to be here. and I say that in life and on YouTube or on this podcast.
Thank you, Carlos. I appreciate that so much. And yeah, we will be in touch, and I'll make sure that folks can find your links and all of that in your bio in the text of this video. This has been a privilege. I can't wait to do it again.
We will.